Hi. If you have been on any of my lives lately on TikTok, then you have heard me say that I wanted to start doing more YouTube videos. Why? Because I want to do longer videos ranting about the books that I have loved, about the books that I have DNF'd, and about the books that I cannot wait to read. So this one is going to be my first one, and I figured the best way to start off would be to talk about my favorite books that I read in 2025. Now, I am going to do my absolute best not to spoil these books for anybody who may still want to read them, okay? But nonetheless, we are going to be talking about some of the things in the book, maybe the plot points that truly stood out to me and made it one of my favorite books of 2025. So just know that there may be minor spoilers, but I will do my best not to put any major spoilers in any of these videos. Now, of course, I am going to give you guys my favorite book of the year, okay? That is my number one book that I read in 2025 that nothing else compared to. But we are going to save the best for last. So let's just start with some books that I read in 2025 that I absolutely loved. Now, I think the best way to start off is by talking about a book that I would have never picked up if I didn't have severe FOMO, okay? Because once you see so many people rate a book 6 stars, you're so curious that you just want to read it now. So, this book isn't generally something that I would go for. I would classify it as like a drama with like some romance and some thriller aspects in it. But the book is The Favorites by Lane Fargo. This was a 6 star read for me. And I don't think it was necessarily the book, but the audiobook itself was phenomenal. Okay. The writing is great, the story was great, but those audio narrators really brought these characters to life. Okay, so a little background on this book. We are following two figure skaters who have known each other since they were kids, right? And they're trying to make it to the Olympics. However, we are told right off the bat that something very tragic happens in this book, and you're trying to figure out what happened. And the cool thing about this book is it is set as if you are watching like a TV show documentary. So there are pages where you are hearing the narrator of the documentary talking, and they're doing interviews with other people who were involved, and it is just phenomenal. This was such a fun read. I truly enjoyed every second of this. And I wish I could go back and experience this again for the first time because it was so freaking good. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and read you just this little first page. If this doesn't convince you to read this book, I don't know what will, okay? Today is the 10th anniversary of the worst day of my life, as if I could forget when millions of strangers have been so eager to remind me. I'm sure you've seen the news stories, magazine covers, the social media posts. Maybe you're planning to snuggle up on your sofa tonight with a bowl of popcorn and binge the documentary series released to commemorate the occasion. Go right ahead, enjoy the show, but don't fool yourself into thinking you know me. By now, I've heard it all. Katerina Shaw, she's a bitch, a diva, a sore loser, a manipulative liar. Cold blooded, a cheater, a criminal, an attention whore, an actual whore, even a murderess. Call me what you want. I don't give a damn anymore. My story is mine, and I'll tell it the same way I skated. In my own way, on my own terms. We'll see who wins in the end. The Favorites by Lane Fargo. One of my favorite books of the year, 6 stars. Now, keeping in tune with books that I probably would have never picked up had somebody not told me to read it, this one very much so falls into that category, okay? I have never really read like monster smut. I've never read a relationship between a human and a monster, right? And so I figured maybe I can just kind of like ease myself into it. So when I picked up this book here, Bound to the Shadow Prince by Ruby Dixon, I was a little timid because I did not know what to expect. However, I heard Shadow Prince and that made me think he was a person, and I was very, very mistaken. Okay, this is not a person. He is not a human. He is large with wings. He is gray. He has horns. His knees bend backwards. He is not human. Okay, so as soon as I read the description of our main male character, I immediately was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? However, the plot of this book was phenomenal. They are taken and they are locked into a tower, and they are expected to stay there for 7 whole years as a sacrifice to the gods for their lands. However, things go bad and they end up having to leave the tower. Okay, so this book is Incredible. And it's a quick, easy read. This is a standalone. I had a really good time. And this was the first book that I read by Ruby Dixon. And the audiobook was also fantastic. Like, truly, the characters just came to life and the world came to life. And it was such a good time. I truly enjoyed this. So, if you're looking for something to kind of ease your way into the monster smut genre, this might do it for you, but just proceed with caution because it is aggressive. And I didn't know what nodding was until I read this. So, yeah, Bound to the Shadow Prince by Ruby Dixon. Now, most of you guys are joining me from TikTok, okay? So, a lot of you guys have heard me say that I'm very timid when it comes to reading YA novels, specifically YA fantasy, because they feel YA to me most of the time. And I am 30 years old, and reading a romance novel or a fantasy novel about 16, 17, 18-year-olds is usually it's kind of icky for me because I don't want to catch myself swooning over somebody who is not of the right age. That's like the Boys of Tommen series. I had to DNF that series because it made me really uncomfortable that our characters were not of age, okay? However, this duology here that I just dropped, mind you, this duology here is a YA duology. It is a fantasy and it was incredible, okay? So this is going to be The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo and Crooked Kingdom. This is a duology. Again, it is completed. This was so good. It was so intricate. It was so detailed. And the small details that you think don't matter so much. And everything comes so full circle in this duology. It is magnificent. These kids, I say kids, but they are a group of assassins, right? These kids find themselves in predicaments that you think there is no possible way that they are going to get themselves out of this, and they do. And they do it so well. This duology was magnificent. This restored my faith in YA novels. And so now I'm just so happy that I actually took the time to read this because these were sitting on my shelf for so long. Okay, so if you have Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo sitting on your shelf, don't wait anymore. Go pick these up. They are fantastic. Now, we all know that I have to have plot with my smut, okay? However, sometimes the smut outweighs the plot and it still ends up being an incredible read, okay? So, this one, the smut kind of outweighed the plot, but the plot was still really good and the smut was incredible. So, that would be A Court of Nightmares by K.A. Knight, okay? This was awesome. I actually enjoyed this, and I have never really read a book that was like reverse harem that I thoroughly enjoyed, but this was magnificent. And the plot, although it fell second to the smut and to the romance, the plot was still there. It was still very good. And I felt like the ending of this book really gave us the conclusion that we needed. And it was just great. Now, this is a part of a series, but they are interconnected standalones in this series. So I feel like you could read just this one if you wanted to, or you could dive into the whole series. I have the whole series and I intend to continue because this one was good enough with the balance of the plot and the smut that I feel like I could continue with this. So, A Court of Nightmares by K.A. Knight. So this next book actually sat on my shelf for almost 2 whole years before I decided to pick it up. Why? Because it had so many mixed reviews that I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. And I also had a bad experience with this author with the first book that I read. Okay, so the book is Twisted Love by Ana Huang. Okay, I read King of Wrath and I did not like King of Wrath. I just felt like her writing style was not for me. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with her writing style. It just wasn't for me. So then picking this up, I was really timid because people either love this or they hate this. And I didn't know where I was going to fall, and I didn't want it to ruin Ana Huang for me because I truly want to love her. And I picked this book up thinking that I was going to hate it because so many people did, and I loved it. I loved this. I don't know about you, girl, but I was kicking my feet and giggling this entire book. It was fantastic. And it had such a good plot while still having this cute romance and like this smutty just steam between the two of them that has been there like their whole lives. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Twisted Love by Ana Huang was a 5-star read for me. So if you have this one on your shelf and you have been timid about it because it has a lot of discourse around it, don't be shy, pick it up. Just because other people don't like it doesn't mean that you won't. Now, of course, I will not forget about my horror and thriller girlies, okay? So, again, I am kind of timid when it comes to YA, and I know that Darcy Coates is generally considered a YA thriller, mystery, horror author, okay? So, I've been really timid to pick up some of her work. I've read a couple of her books, and they were very YA, but they were fun, and they were stories about haunted houses and stuff. So, when I saw that she had a book that was a compilation of short stories, I wanted to give it a try because I generally don't like compilations of short stories, right? But nonetheless, I picked up Ghost Camera by Darcy Coates. I thoroughly enjoyed this, okay? Now, there was one story in this book in particular that I did not like. I did not think that it was for me. That does not mean that it was bad. However, every single short story in this book left my jaw on the floor. It was immaculate, and I was engrossed in this story from beginning to end. Each story just progressively got more and more twisted, and they were so much fun. So, of course, you start off with the story about the ghost camera, where she takes a picture and she's seeing ghosts in it. But she doesn't realize that the more pictures you take, the closer to that line of the veil you get, and then they can start to get you, right? So, it's super cool. That was a really fun one. There's also a woman who survives a plane crash in the middle of nowhere. It is an Arctic tundra, and she's accompanied by somebody else, but they're trying to find help. And as they're walking through this area, there's something following them. But the other lady that's with her just keeps saying, "Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Don't look at it." And so she's trying not to look at it, but like she wants to look at it. That one was really, really good. There's a shoebox full of VHS tapes in one of the other stories, and they have a note attached that says, "Don't watch, you'll regret it." Oh, there is regret. Yeah, there is regret after she watches them. So again, Darcy Coates, Ghost Camera, this was so much fun. If you're looking for quick, easy, devourable reads, this has a bunch of little short stories in it, and they are immaculate. Now, this next one is specifically for my audiobook girlies, okay? Because I did not read this one, I listened to it. And I listened to it in one day. My husband took the toddler, said, "We're gonna go out for the day. I will see you in a few hours." And I cleaned. And while I cleaned, I listened to this. And let me tell you, I had to take my headphones off multiple times because I was getting creeped out. Being home alone, it was starting to get dark, and I kept feeling like I was hearing noises outside of my headphones, and it was just the experience that this book was giving me. It was incredible. And that would be Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell, okay? The audiobook for this was so good and so chilling. It is very hard for a book to give me the heebie-jeebies anymore because I read so much. I'm advanced. I can generally pick out the plot points and the twists, and I know what's going to happen way before it happens. But nonetheless, this one was creepy. This one made me uncomfortable, and this one made me certain that I will never be renting a cabin in the middle of fucking nowhere. That is not going to be happening anytime in my life because of things like this. This was magnificent. So if you are looking for a quick, easy, spooky read that is going to actually be creepy and make you uncomfortable, Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell will certainly do that. Okay, so this is my second favorite book of the year. Okay, so out of all of the books that I read in 2025, this book takes number two. Okay, so I read the first book in the series and I devoured it, gobbled that shit up, loved it. I read the second book in the series and I hated it. I had to force myself to continue because I wanted to understand and I wanted to know what happened. And then the third book came out. And I told myself if I do not like the third book the way that I didn't like the second book, I will not be continuing this series because that's two out of three that I didn't like. It is what it is. Okay. So the book in question is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. Okay. I know there's a lot of hype that goes around Fourth Wing and this series in general. And listen, I am not always looking for a literary masterpiece. Okay. Is this a literary masterpiece? No, this series is not. Is it something completely original? No, it also is not. This is very similar to things that we have seen in many other books, okay? That does not mean that it is not a good fucking time. Okay, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for an escape, a good time. Not everything needs to be a literary masterpiece. However, this one, after reading Iron Flame and not liking it, this one completely revived this series for me. And I know a lot of people have opposite thoughts on that. A lot of people, this book made them DNF this series because there's so much information kind of just being thrown at you in the beginning of this. But the emotions that this book and this story is starting to evoke for me, is fantastic. And there were moments in this book where I was crying so hard that I was like, if this is truly what's happening in this story, like I'm going to DNF this book. Like I can't. I cannot handle this book going this way. It just made me feel. And it did a good job of keeping me drawn into the story and having me care about the characters. I love towards the end that we started to get shifts in like perspectives and we started to get chapters from other people's views, and it was just fantastic, okay? So if you've been on the edge about reading Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, Onyx Storm, the Empyrean series, okay, I would say don't go into it looking for a literary masterpiece because that is not what you're going to get, okay? These have flaws and that is okay. But the story itself is fun. The plot is plotting, the romance is romancing, and it is just overall a good time. As long as you are not somebody who is just looking for a literary masterpiece, this is fun. This is a foot kick and good time. So I loved it, and this was my second favorite book of the year. I read it all the way back when it came out, and it is still one of my favorite books of the year. So you stuck around long enough that I know you are waiting for my book of the year, my favorite book that I read in 2025. And before I talk about the actual book itself, I want to talk about some of the backstory on this book because I wasn't going to read it, if I'm being honest. I originally had it pre-ordered and I canceled the pre-order because I was like, you know what, it really just does not sound like it's up my alley. It does not sound like it's something that I'm going to truly enjoy, so I think I'm just going to skip it. And I tell you what, the day that this book released, by the end of the night, I had so much FOMO that I convinced my husband to take me to Walmart to see if they had a copy of it because I couldn't take it anymore, okay? And we get to Walmart and I'm not seeing a copy of it and I'm starting to kind of internally panic because I'm like, damn, am I just not meant to read this book? And finally, I came across one copy that was tucked behind a bunch of other books as if someone was trying to hide it for themselves. And I snatched it up and I said, I was meant to read this book. And thank God I did because it is my favorite book of 2025. My favorite book of 2025, and probably my favorite book that I have ever read in my entire life, is Alchemized by Senlin Yu. Okay, now this was originally a Harry Potter fanfic that was posted online on like Wattpad or something. I don't even know. But it was a Harry Potter fanfic and it got over 16 million downloads. Okay, so the publishers reached out to the author and said, hey, we really want to publish this, but because there are copyright issues, it can't be a Harry Potter fanfic. So if you can rewrite this as a story of its own, we will publish it. And there was Alchemized. That is how Alchemized was born. Now, Alchemized is broken up into three parts, okay? We have part one, and in part one, our main character, Helena, has lost her memories. She is pulled out of a stasis tank, and she is a prisoner of war. And they find that her brain has been basically rewired, and they're like, how is this even possible? What are you hiding? So all of part one is them trying to draw out of her mind whatever it is that is hidden in her memories. Now, part two is the memories, okay? So, part two is the girth of this book. It is the war. That is where we get all of the awful, heartbreaking, just nasty shit that happens during war, okay? And I think that's one of my favorite things about this book is it accurately depicts the politics and the manipulation and the lies that takes place on both sides of a war, right? Because in reality, this book is a perfect representation of the fact that nobody wins in war. Everybody is being manipulated and lied to in one way or another. Everybody thinks that they are the good guy. And then part three of this book comes back to the present. Okay, so part one, we are in the present. They are trying to figure out what's going on inside of her mind. Part two is a big old flashback where we get all of the nitty gritty, the war, all of the memories, everything happens in part two. And then in part three, we come back to the present. And that's where things start to get really, really intense. And it just, this book, man, if you've read this book, you understand that it is hard to find words to explain why this book is so magnificent. But I will say that this book is a marathon. It is not a sprint, okay? It takes time and patience. This book, I think it was page 510 that I finally was like, oh my God. Like it finally hit and things started to click. And I found myself having to go back to part one and connecting all these dots. It was so intricate and so meticulously detailed. This is a work of art. This is a masterpiece, okay? For somebody who wants to read a book that could be considered a literary masterpiece, this one would do it because it has so many vital aspects. It is incredible, and I loved every moment of it. So much so that it was 1,024 pages. And when I picked it up originally, I was like, "What? How could it be that serious? How could it possibly be that deep?" 1,024 pages was not enough. I would have read 1,000 more because this story is just that good. Mm, this will haunt me forever. As soon as I finished this, and I did listen to the audio for this as well, the audio was 10 stars. So, so good. Okay. But as soon as I finished this, I picked it up and started reading it again. Because after you finish it the first time and you have connected all of the dots and you have put all of the pieces together, when you read it the second time, the impact that it has on you is so, so different than the first time. I loved this book. If you are looking for something that is going to tear you apart in the best way possible and put you back together, Alchemized by Sin Yu will do it. I find it hard to believe that any other book that I read ever is going to top this. So there we have it. My favorite reads of 2025 all the way down to my number one book of the year, probably my number one book ever, okay? Now again, this was my first episode. Obviously, I have a new microphone. I'm trying new things. This is going to be a learning curve. The quality of these videos is going to get better. It's just going to take time. I'm still trying to figure out editing and everything like that because I've never really done this, okay? But y'all stick with me. Episode 2 is going to be the books that I DNF'd in 2025. And why? Why did I DNF those books? So, just because I didn't like a book doesn't mean that you won't like it, okay? So, just keep that in mind when watching the next episode. But I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. I love you guys. Stay safe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for hanging out with me.